Hello everyone. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly felt your partner's touch? Not just a quick brush on the shoulder, not the hurried kiss before leaving for work, but a moment where your body melted into theirs, where the contact lingered long enough to remind you that you are still desired, still chosen. In the early days of love, physical touch comes so easily. Hands search for each other in the dark, arms wrap around without needing permission, kisses are stolen like secrets. But somewhere along the road of years, bills, children, routines, and responsibilities, touch becomes functional. A pat on the back to say, I see you. A peck on the cheek to say good night. The kind of gestures that are tender, yes, but no longer charged with the electricity of longing. And yet, the truth is this, our need for physical closeness does not disappear simply because we've grown older together. If anything, it becomes even more essential. Touch is the language we spoke before we had words. It is the reassurance that we still belong to each other. So tonight, we're going to talk about what physical touch really means in a long-term marriage, why it fades and how it can be reclaimed, not as a duty, but as a doorway back into passion, presence, and love. Let's be honest, marriage is not only about staying together, it's about staying connected. And when I say connected, I don't mean simply sharing a bed or a bank account. I mean the kind of connection that makes you feel alive when your partner's hand brushes against yours, that subtle reassurance that you are not just living side by side, but that your bodies and souls are still in conversation. The irony is that in the beginning of a relationship, touch is effortless. It is playful, spontaneous, sometimes even uncontrollable. You remember what it felt like, the rush of anticipation, the gentle brushing of fingers that felt like a spark, the kiss that seemed to last longer than time itself. In those moments, you didn't have to think about touch. It simply happened. Your bodies craved it. But over the years, the story changes. The same couple who once couldn't keep their hands off each other now sits on opposite sides of the couch scrolling through their phones. The hugs at the door shrink into quick pats. The kisses become routine. And the long embraces that once felt like a sanctuary now feel like a luxury no one has time for. And here is where the paradox of long-term love begins. The longer we are with someone, the more secure we feel. And yet, the less intentional we often become. In the early days, you used touch as a way of saying, I want you, I choose you. But after years, touch often becomes, I know you're here. I don't need to prove it. And while security is beautiful, it can also dull the spark that intimacy needs to thrive. So the question is, why does physical touch matter so much in marriage? Why is it not just a nice to have, but a fundamental part of love's survival? Touch, you see, is more than physical. It is emotional, psychological, even spiritual. When your partner reaches out and strokes your back, it is not simply skin against skin. It is a reminder that you are safe, that you are wanted, that you are still seen. Neuroscience tells us that when we experience loving touch, our bodies release oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It lowers stress, reduces anxiety, and strengthens trust. That is why the couples who maintain a culture of touch, hand-holding, cuddling, kissing, lingering in each other's presence, are the ones who report feeling not just happier, but more resilient in the face of life's challenges. Now let's pause here, because I know some of you are thinking, but we don't touch because we're too busy, or too tired, or maybe because we've lost the habit and it feels awkward to start again. And yes, all of that is true. Life has a way of putting out small fires, and intimacy often gets pushed to the background. But here's the reality: when touch disappears from a marriage, the relationship becomes more like a partnership, a co-management of daily life. And what gets lost is the very thing that once made you lovers, not just housemates. I want you to imagine this for a moment. A couple in their late 30s, together for more than a decade. They love each other deeply, they share children, a home, and countless memories. But when I ask them, when was the last time you kissed with passion, not obligation, they both hesitate. They cannot remember. And in that silence, there is a grief neither of them wants to admit, because the absence of touch is not neutral. It creates distance. It sends a message, even if unspoken. You are no longer the person I long for. And that message is devastating. But here is the beauty: touch can be reclaimed. Passion is not something you either have or don't have. It is something you cultivate. And the first step is awareness. Awareness that physical intimacy is not just about sex. It is about the micro moments that accumulate: the hand on the lower back as you pass by, the kiss that lingers a second longer, the playful squeeze of the hand under the dinner table. These are not small gestures. They are the glue that holds a marriage together. You see, in the language of love, words can lie, but touch rarely does. You can say, I love you, out of habit, but the body speaks a more honest truth. When you touch your partner with presence, when you let your hand rest instead of rushing away, you are saying, I am still here with you, I still choose you. And yet so many couples struggle here. They tell me, we want to bring back the touch, but it feels forced. Oh, we've grown so used to not touching that now it feels almost unnatural. That discomfort is normal. After years of neglect, even reaching for your partner's hand can feel vulnerable. But vulnerability is not a weakness. It is the exact ingredient that makes intimacy possible. Let me give you an example. A woman once told me that every night, as her husband reached to turn off the bedside lamp, she longed for him to also reach for her hand. She never said it out loud, but she craved that small gesture. One night, after a conversation, he did exactly that. He held her hand before switching off the light. She said it felt like oxygen rushing back into the room. This is the power of touch. It restores the bond not with grand gestures, but with the simplest acts of presence. And this is where I want to invite you to reflect. Ask yourself, when was the last time I reached for my partner without an agenda, without expectation? When was the last time I simply touched to say, "See you, I love you"? Because those moments matter more than you realize. As we continue, we will look at the ways touch evolves in marriage, the obstacles that stand in its way, and how you can bring it back in ways that feel natural, playful, and deeply nourishing. Because the truth is, this passion does not fade because time has passed. It fades because we stop feeding it. And touch is one of the most essential ways we feed love. Have you noticed how, in the rhythm of daily life, what once felt natural between you and your partner begins to disappear almost without you noticing? It isn't that you suddenly decided not to hold hands or not to kiss passionately. It's that the world crept in. Work deadlines, children's needs, the endless lists of groceries and bills and responsibilities. They all crowded out the space that once belonged to desire. And here's the irony. The very things that give a marriage stability are often the same things that make it lose its spark. Predictability, reliability, routine. These are essential for trust. But desire does not thrive in sameness. Desire is fueled by mystery, by surprise, by the sense that your partner is not entirely yours, that they remain slightly out of reach. When every corner of life becomes known, desire quietly begins to wither. So when I ask couples, why do you think touch has faded? They usually give me two answers. The first is fatigue. We're just too tired. The second is familiarity. We know each other too well. But behind these answers, there is often something deeper. Touch doesn't only disappear because we forget. It disappears because we stop daring to reach out. Because reaching out makes us vulnerable to rejection. And rejection, even in small doses, hurts deeply in a marriage. Think about it. If you lean in to kiss your partner and they turn their cheek, what do you feel? If you reach for their hand and they pull away because they're distracted, how do you interpret that moment? For many people, these small moments become quiet wounds. They accumulate over time until one day you stop trying. You convince yourself, they don't want me. Better to protect myself than to risk that sting again. And little by little, the habit of not touching takes root. This is what I call the silent erosion of intimacy. No fights, no big betrayals, just absence. The absence of contact, the absence of gestures that once carried passion, and with that absence comes distance. Not only physical distance, but emotional. Couples tell me, we still love each other, but we don't feel as close. And often the missing link is this: they have let touch slip away. But let's go even further. There's another reason touch fades, and it's one that few people dare to admit. Sometimes we withhold touch as a form of protest. We don't say, I'm angry at you for not listening. We don't say, I feel invisible in this marriage. Instead, we withdraw physically. We stop touching, and in that withdrawal we send a message: you don't deserve my affection. It's not always conscious, but it is powerful. And over time, it creates a wall between partners that words alone cannot break. So what do? How do we begin to dismantle that wall and invite touch back in without forcing it, without making it feel like another obligation on the to-do list? The first step is to reframe touch. Too many couples equate physical closeness exclusively with sex. And while sexual intimacy is important, it is only one expression of touch. Think of it this way: touch has a wide vocabulary. Sometimes it says, I desire you. Sometimes it says, I'm here with you. Sometimes it says, I care. When you only allow touch to exist in the bedroom, you starve your marriage of countless opportunities to feel connected. Imagine walking past your partner in the kitchen and gently brushing your hand against their back. Imagine pausing at the door, not just to say goodbye, but to pull them into an embrace that lingers 5 seconds longer. Imagine sitting next to each other and letting your knees rest against one another, a quiet reminder that you are still linked. These are the small touches that accumulate into intimacy, and they cost nothing. They take seconds, but they shift the emotional climate of a relationship in profound ways. Let me share a story. I once spoke with a man who told me that every evening, when he came home from work, his wife was already busy preparing dinner, helping the children with homework, multitasking in ways that seemed invisible but exhausting. For years, he would simply greet her with a quick hello and move on. One day, he decided to try something different. Instead of words, he walked straight up to her, placed his hands gently on her shoulders, and kissed her cheek without saying anything. She froze at first, surprised. Then she softened. She told him later that it was the first time in years she felt like a woman in his eyes, not just a mother or a housekeeper. One gesture shifted how she experienced her role in the marriage. This is the point. Touch is transformative, not because it is grand, but because it is intentional. And yet many couples resist because they fear it will feel awkward. I hear this so often. It doesn't feel natural anymore. But let me tell you something, awkwardness is part of the process of relearning. The first time you go to the gym after years away, it feels awkward. The first time you try a new language, it feels clumsy. But if you wait for comfort before you begin, you'll never begin. In love as in life, you must be willing to risk discomfort to create change. Another important step is presence. Touch without presence feels hollow. Think of the absent-minded hug where one partner is still scrolling on their phone, or the distracted kiss where the mind is already elsewhere. These gestures don't feed intimacy, they drain it. What matters is not the quantity of touch, but the quality. A single embrace held with full attention is worth more than 100 distracted pats on the shoulder. Presence is what transforms touch into connection, and presence begins with slowing down. Slowing down enough to notice your partner's breathing, the way their body feels against yours, the warmth of their skin. Desire lives in those moments of awareness. But let me be clear, rebuilding touch is not about adding another chore. It is not about saying, we must hug 3 times a day. It is about cultivating curiosity again, the curiosity you once had when you couldn't wait to discover every inch of your partner's body. Curiosity is what turns routine gestures into something alive. Ask yourself, what would it feel like to caress their hand differently tonight? What would it be like to kiss them slowly, with no goal beyond savoring the kiss itself? Because here's the truth, long-term love often loses its playfulness. Everything becomes scheduled, efficient, practical. But touch is where play can return. It doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be perfect. It simply has to be intentional. And so I invite you to imagine this tonight when you're sitting next to your partner. Instead of staying in your separate corners, close the distance. Let your shoulder rest against theirs. Hold their hand, not because you're trying to spark sex, not because you're checking a box, but because touch is how we remind each other that love is still alive. When couples begin practicing this, something remarkable happens. They don't just feel closer physically, they begin to communicate better. The unspoken tensions soften, the arguments lose some of their sharpness, and laughter begins to return, because when the body feels safe, the heart opens. This is why physical touch matters so deeply. It is not just about skin, it is about safety, presence, and belonging. It is about reminding each other that even after years we are still lovers, not just co-managers of a household. When I sit with couples, I often ask them, what are the rituals of touch in your marriage? And most of the time they look at me with puzzled faces. Rituals, they know about the morning coffee, the school drop-offs, the Saturday errands. But rituals of touch, those have often been lost along the way. And yet rituals are what turn ordinary gestures into something sacred. Think about it. When you were dating, you had rituals of touch without even naming them. The way you always reached for each other's hands in the car. The way your goodnight kiss seemed to seal the day like a promise. The way a hug after a long separation felt like returning home. These weren't random moments. They were rituals. They carried meaning. They created expectation. They shaped the emotional rhythm of your relationship. Over time, those rituals often vanish. Not because you stopped loving each other, but because life became louder than love. But here's the beauty. You can bring them back. You can decide intentionally that every time one of you leaves the house, you will pause for a real kiss. You can choose that before falling asleep, you will hold each other, even if only for a few minutes. These rituals don't have to be elaborate. They simply have to be consistent, because consistency tells your partner, no matter what the day brings, we will always return to this. But there's something important here. Rituals of touch should not feel like another obligation, another thing on the list. They should feel like small gifts, moments you look forward to. That means they need playfulness, variety, and yes, sometimes even humor. A gentle tap on the butt as you pass each other in the hallway. A spontaneous dance in the kitchen. The tickle of fingertips across the arm while watching television. When touch becomes playful, it becomes alive again. Now, let's talk about desire, because many people ask me, how do we reignite the spark without making it feel forced? And the answer lies in removing the pressure. Too many couples approach intimacy with the heaviness of expectation. We have to have sex tonight. We need to fix what's broken. That kind of pressure is the enemy of desire. Desire thrives in freedom, not obligation. Instead of forcing passion, think of creating space for it. Space begins with touch that has no agenda. A kiss that doesn't lead anywhere. A message that isn't a prelude. A cuddle that exists simply to be enjoyed. When touch is stripped of expectation, it becomes safe again, and from safety, desire often re-emerges naturally. One woman once told me that the most erotic moment she had with her husband in years wasn't during sex. It was one Sunday morning when he reached over, pulled her against him and whispered, "I just love holding you like this." No agenda, no demand, just presence. She said it was in that very moment she remembered why she desired him in the first place, because he made her feel cherished, not pressured. And this is the secret many people forget. Intimacy is not just about what happens in the bedroom. It is built in the hallway, in the kitchen, on the couch. The couples who nurture physical touch outside of sex are the couples who find that sex becomes richer, deeper, more playful, because the foundation of closeness is already there. But beyond desire, touch also deepens emotional intimacy. Have you noticed how hard it is to stay angry when you are holding hands? How difficult it is to keep your guard up when your partner pulls you into a warm embrace? Touch disarms. It softens the walls we build when we feel hurt or unseen. It reminds us that beneath the arguments and frustrations, there is still love. I recall a man who told me that he and his wife had stopped touching for years. Their arguments had created a cold silence between them. One day, after a particularly heated fight, he decided to reach for her hand. He said he didn't know why he did it. He just felt the impulse. She resisted at first, but then she let her hand stay in his. And in that silence, something shifted. He told me, we didn't solve the argument that night, but we remembered that we still belonged to each other. Touch doesn't always resolve problems, but it often makes resolution possible. This is why I say that physical touch is not optional in a long-term marriage. It is essential. Without it, love becomes an idea, something we say but no longer embody. With it, love becomes lived, felt, tangible. Now, let me speak directly to you. If you are in a marriage where touch has faded, do not despair. This does not mean the passion is gone forever. It means it has been neglected, and anything neglected can be revived with care. Start small. Start with a hug that lasts 10 seconds longer than usual. Start with holding hands during a walk. Start with brushing your partner's hair back from their face and simply looking at them, really looking, as if to say, I still see you. And as you begin, notice what happens. Notice how your body softens when touched. Notice how your heart feels less guarded. Notice how arguments lose some of their weight when intimacy returns. This is not magic. It is the biology of connection. Your nervous system responds to loving touch. It tells you, I am safe, I am loved. And from that place, everything in the marriage feels more possible. So, the truth about physical touch in long-term marriage is this: it is not just a romantic extra. It is the foundation of intimacy, the bridge that keeps you lovers and not just roommates. It is the silent language that says, I still choose you. And remember, touch does not disappear because you have been together too long. It disappears because you stop choosing it. Every day, you have the chance to choose again, to reach for your partner, to close the distance, to remind them and yourself that love is not only spoken but lived. So tonight, when you go to bed, don't just turn off the light. Reach across the space between you. Hold their hand. Let your bodies remember what your words cannot always express, because sometimes one simple touch can change everything. One of the most fascinating things about long-term relationships is that intimacy is never static. Just as your body changes, your marriage changes, and the meaning of touch changes with it. What once came naturally in your 20s may feel different in your 40s, and what feels essential in your 60s may not have even crossed your mind in the early years. To understand the truth about physical touch in marriage, we must also understand its evolution across the seasons of life. Think back to the beginning. In the early days, touch was abundant, fueled by novelty and urgency. You could barely keep your hands off each other. Touch was the language of discovery. You were exploring, claiming, tasting the sweetness of something new. Desire thrived on uncertainty, on the thrill of not knowing everything about the other person. Every touch was both a question and an answer. Do you want me? Yes, I want you to. Then comes parenthood. For many couples, and everything changes. The body of the woman in particular becomes associated with caregiving. She is touched all day by children, by infants who need her constantly. And for many mothers, the thought of more touch at the end of the day feels overwhelming. It is not that she does not love her partner. It is that her body is exhausted, claimed by responsibility. For fathers too, the weight of work and parenting often shifts desire into the background. In this stage, touch can easily disappear, not because the love is gone, but because the energy is. This is the moment when many couples drift into what I call functional intimacy. They share responsibilities, they manage life together, but the body-to-body connection fades. The tragedy is not the absence of love, it is the absence of lovers. And if this continues unchecked, couples often wake up years later realizing that they are more like business partners than passionate partners. So how do you adapt in this stage? You redefine touch. Instead of waiting for grand passion, you learn to appreciate the small, grounding gestures: the hand on the shoulder while cooking, the arm around the waist in the middle of chaos, the short cuddle before sleep. These moments matter. They don't need to be long, they don't need to be perfect. They simply need to say, even in this storm, I still want you. Now let's move to midlife. By the time couples reach their 40s or 50s, many have settled into long-standing routines. Some feel more distant than ever. Others feel an unexpected resurgence of closeness. Why? Because midlife brings with it a confrontation with time. We begin to realize that life is not endless. Children grow, careers shift, bodies change. And suddenly, intimacy takes on a different urgency. For some, this realization reignites desire. They begin to touch more, to reclaim each other in the face of life's brevity. For others, it creates a crisis. They wonder, is this it? is this all there is? In these moments, physical touch can either become a bridge back to each other or a glaring absence that highlights the distance. What matters in midlife is intentionality. Desire no longer lives in spontaneity alone. It must be cultivated. This is where couples can rediscover each other by choosing touch deliberately. A weekend away, a slow dance in the living room, exploring new forms of sensuality. These choices are not about pretending you are 20 again. They are about honoring the love you have built while still feeding the passion that keeps it alive. And then comes aging. For many couples, the later years bring fears about the body, its health, its strength, its beauty. Some withdraw because they feel less desirable, others because they fear being rejected. But let me tell you something important. Touch in later life may be slower, gentler, less urgent, but it can also be more profound. It carries the weight of decades together. A kiss at 70 is not the same as a kiss at 20. It is layered with history, with forgiveness, with countless memories of choosing each other again and again. In these years, sex may look different, but intimacy does not have to fade. In fact, research shows that couples who continue to touch, who cuddle, hold hands, stroke each other's hair, report higher levels of satisfaction and lower levels of loneliness. Touch is no longer about performance. It is about presence, about saying, even as our bodies change, my love for you remains embodied, not just spoken. One elderly man once told me that every night, before he and his wife went to sleep, they would simply lie facing each other and let their hands rest together. We don't need more than that anymore, he said. Her hand in mine is enough to remind me that I am not alone. That is the power of touch in the later years. It carries a depth that youth cannot imagine. So across the lifespan of a marriage, the meaning of touch transforms. At first it is urgent, then it becomes grounding. Later it becomes intentional, and finally it becomes profoundly tender. What remains constant is not the form of touch, but the need for it. At every age, in every stage, the body longs to be reminded you are not alone. You are still desired. You still belong. And so, if you find yourself in a stage where touch feels absent, don't assume it cannot be revived. Don't assume that passion belongs only to youth. Desire is not a fixed state. It is something you cultivate, adapt, and redefine across the years. The real question is, are you willing to keep choosing it, to reach again even after rejection, to touch again even after years of silence? Because marriage is not a one-time choice. It is a daily one. And touch is one of the most powerful ways we continue to say yes. When you think about it, marriage is a story written not only in words but in gestures. The years are measured not only by the anniversaries or the milestones but by the small, almost invisible moments of touch. The hand you reached for in the hospital waiting room, the kiss that welcomed you home after a long trip, the hug that carried you through grief. These moments weave the fabric of intimacy far more than any dramatic declaration. And yet, these are often the very moments that fade when we stop paying attention. Not because we stopped loving each other, but because we forgot that love must be lived in the body as much as in the mind. We thought security alone would be enough, but security without touch can feel like distance. So let's return to the truth. Physical touch in long-term marriage is not a luxury. It is not an optional extra reserved for the young or the newly in love. It is the oxygen of intimacy. It is what keeps you from drifting into parallel lives where you share responsibilities but not heart. It is what transforms your partner from the person I live with back into the person I long for. Think of your own marriage for a moment. Where do your rituals of touch live? Do they show up in the morning when you say goodbye, at night before you turn off the light, or have they been crowded out by routine, fatigue, or silent resentments? And if they have, can you imagine what it would feel like to bring them back? Not all at once, not perfectly, but slowly, one gesture at a time. Here is what I want you to remember. Intimacy is not about doing more. It is about being present in what you already do. You don't need hours or dramatic gestures. You need awareness. A hug that lasts just a few seconds longer. A kiss given with your full attention. A hand placed gently on your partner's back to say, I'm here, I see you. These gestures don't require more time, they require more presence. And presence is contagious. When you begin to show up in your touch, your partner feels it. They soften, they respond. Intimacy is not built by one person alone, but it often begins with one person daring to go first. But I know some of you are still hesitant. You may be thinking, what if my partner doesn't respond? What if it feels forced? What if it's too late? These are real fears. And the only way to answer them is this: it is never too late to reach across the space between you. It may feel awkward at first. It may not be reciprocated immediately. But intimacy is not measured by perfection. It is measured by effort, by the willingness to risk vulnerability for the sake of love. And here's the secret: when you reach, even clumsily, you are saying something profound. You are saying, I have not given up on us. I still believe we can be lovers, not just partners. I still want you to feel wanted. That message alone can shift the energy of a relationship. So tonight, when you find yourself next to your partner, take a breath. Let your body remember that touch is not only about desire, it is about belonging. Reach for their hand. Place your palm against theirs and notice how it feels, even if it's been a while. Let the silence between you soften. You don't need words. Sometimes touch says everything words cannot. And if you're listening to this and thinking, We've already lost too much. It won't matter now. Let me remind you, intimacy is not about the years behind you. It is about the moments ahead. You cannot change yesterday, but you can choose today. You can choose to lean in instead of pulling away. You can choose to hold instead of withhold. You can choose to let your body speak love even when your words fall short. This is the truth about physical touch in long-term marriage. It is the simplest act, yet the most profound. It is both ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary because it is just skin against skin. Extraordinary because it carries the power to heal wounds, reignite desire, and remind two people that even after decades, they are still each other's chosen one. So I want to leave you with this invitation. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until the arguments are solved or until you feel completely ready. Begin now, tonight, with one gesture of presence, a hand, a kiss, a hug, small, simple, intentional, and see what happens when your partner realizes that you are not just there, you are with them. Because at the end of life, we do not remember the arguments, the bills, or the routines. We remember the way we were held, the way someone reached for us, the way love was made tangible through touch. That is the legacy of intimacy. That is the story worth telling. So if this touched you, if you found yourself nodding, remembering, maybe even longing, share it. Share your own story in the comments. What rituals of touch matter to you? What moments do you miss? Or what gestures have kept your marriage alive? I would love to hear them. And if you want more conversations like this, if you want to keep exploring the mysteries of love, desire, and connection, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because together we can learn not just how to stay married, but how to stay in love. Here's to touch, to love lived in the body, to marriages that don't just survive, but thrive through the simple, radical act of reaching for each other again and again.